所以我要
我哋第三節就開始歡。
We now resume, and I would like to welcome the individuals and deputations attending the third session. Let me say this again, and I do it every time. Channel 0 for the floor, 1 for Cantonese, 2 for English, and 3 for Putonghua. And we have arranged your order of speaking in accordance with the sequence of your enrollment. Please note that what you speak will not be covered by Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. You don't enjoy the safeguards and protection. In other words, you have to be responsible for what you say. If you have got a written submission, you may want to give a copy to the Secretariat after the meeting. For the third session, probably we are not that rushed for time, but still I will give you 3 minutes each. All right, first of all, Concerned Group for Subdivided Units in Tai Kok Tsui, Mr. Chen Chiu-long. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Here we talk about alleviation of poverty. For us, the concerned group of subdivided units in Tai Kok Tsui, we believe that the government cannot really address the problem, and so poverty remains. Today, what is the most expensive commodity in Hong Kong? What is the most expensive expenditure? Basically, it's for accommodation. The Commission hasn't addressed the problem of accommodation expenses. I think since we have to pay so much for our accommodation, we have become poor. So you need to address the problem of housing before you can alleviate poverty. You may want to ask us what we have got to say. Now, many tenants have been evicted from their homes. The government has got vacant premises. You can convert them into affordable accommodation so that citizens can have a short-term stay in something like transitional housing. And this way, we don't have to waste the housing resources while the residents can have cheaper accommodation. In the early 1990s, we used to have temporary housing, and then at that time you only paid $200 a month, and on average the household income was $8,000 to $9,000. So you were able to pay $200 only for a place. The THA living conditions may not be good, but then you wait a few years and then you get rehousing into public housing, and we are not wasting the variable land resources at the same time. Second, we want to see the revival of the rent control legislation. We don't want to have it, and we may not need it for the long term. But currently, the housing supply is slow, and the rentals are so expensive that perhaps we need to revive rental control. Housing can only be supplied locally. We cannot rely on imports. So if the housing supply cannot catch up with the demand, perhaps rent control can give tenancy security, and then perhaps it is an answer to our question. Of course, we may not need it on a long-term basis. However, when housing is such an urgent issue, perhaps it is the right answer for the time being. And thirdly, when somebody has waited for public housing for 3 years, during which time he has a lot of difficulties, I think thereafter he should be entitled to a rent assistance. Of course, ultimately, the final solution lies with public housing construction. I think the URA sites can also be used for PRH construction. Thank you. Next, Mr. Ho Fat Keung, Concerned Group for Poor Living Conditions in Tai Kok Tsui. Good afternoon. I live in a subdivided unit. I'm a resident of Tai Kok Tsui. rental levels are very high throughout Hong Kong. We have to spend half of our income on rental, and food prices and everything else is also expensive. Sometimes we have to wait for 5-6 years and still it doesn't get to our turn to be rehoused. Now for the URA sites, I think they have been building luxurious homes. The URA is supposed to assist the government. It is supposed to help the people. I don't think the URA should allow the developers to benefit. I think the URA should have catered more for the well-being of the ordinary people. That's all I want to say. So rent control should be revived as well. And then the rent increase is something I want to talk about. Now, if I have to wait for 6 years, it means that the rent will have been increased by $1,000 a month. So I just want to share my observation with you. It's better to revive rent control, just as what we got 8-10 years ago. Currently, the living cost is too high. Everything is expensive. So I hope the government will address the point of high rental levels. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ho. Next, Ms. Yip from the Hong Kong Catholic Diocese. Well, for the summit this year, they have this theme, promoting youth upward mobility. Probably this is because we are in the post-umbrella campaign or post-umbrella movement era. So the government would like to see this as an answer to the dissatisfaction of the young people. However, the government is simply relying on the Life Buddies scheme. I don't think it's going to help. It is like pouring our money down the drain. We have the youth poverty rate, student loan, among many difficulties faced by the young. For the youth poverty rate, in 1981, at that time, it was 3.9%. Nowadays, it is 8.2%. That's the percentage in 2011. Since 1996, the problem has been aggravated, probably due to the increasing student loan. Six Tung promised to see more students getting a place in the university, but then it is a matter of playing with the words, because the government has been relying on associate degrees instead of university places. Associate degree graduates are suffering even more. Youth poverty rate is going up all the time. Not too long ago, there was a survey telling us that for university graduates, they haven't seen an increase in income. Taking into account inflation, it appears that they are earning less than what their peers used to earn 20 years ago. Now, it has been said that housing should be resolved before we address the problem of poverty. CS4A also mentioned that when we look at the poverty line, we can see that public housing has been very effective in alleviating poverty. Whether we have adequate accommodation will also determine whether we are poor or not. Now, with the points system, young people have no hope of getting a PRH flat, and so they get more and more marginalized when they live in the subdivided units. Income has only been increased by 20% or so, but rental has been increased by 70%. So you can see that the young are suffering more. Therefore, our proposal is that we need to stabilize the rental levels, though not so much reviving the rent control. Secondly, we need to have transitional housing. There are URA sites which have been left idle for more than a decade. And then we need to review the poverty line. And then for the CE, they don't want those earning less than $14,000 a month to have a voice in the public affairs. Then it is not going to address the problem. Next, Land Justice Alliance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have been talking about poverty and the wealth gap for many years, but I don't think the Commission is addressing the cause of poverty as well as the cause of wealth gap. The government would only emphasize that poverty is only a personal issue. CSSA, OALA, etc. are not adequate. I don't think poverty is just a matter for an individual person. I think it is because the direction of our development is wrong, and so poverty is being sustained, and then we are all marginalized, and we only benefit the real estate developers. Now, the living cost is high. Many people have spoken about that. And for the labor market, we have only got casual jobs and part-time jobs. If you say the employment is the best route to address poverty, but in fact the labor market is such that you are faced with long working hours and low income levels. For urban renewal, many older urban areas are being renewed. It means that the poor will be further marginalized. You invoke the public powers so as to help the developers to replace the torn and worn buildings with luxurious homes. Take Century Pool as an example. Many people live in subdivided units. Since the establishment of the URA, 180 buildings have been pulled down. 6,000 people have been displaced as a result of the renewal process. Among them, a lot are poor people and also subdivided unit tenants. In fact, only when you live in the urban area can you find the lower class jobs, long working hours, meager income. But then you need to stay in the urban area. They cannot easily move away from the town center. By pulling down the older buildings, it means that they will find it more and more difficult to get a home. So such policies will not result in improvement of living conditions. For the past decades or so, we will just acknowledge those who get rich by speculating in the markets. For others who are more pragmatic and who are engaged in grassroots jobs, they are not being appreciated. I think we should change so that everybody can lead a dignified life. I don't think we should just be happy with the changes in the figures, saying that we have only got 960,000 people beyond the poverty line. Thank you. Next, Ms. Tai Yue-ching, Alliance for Local Youth. We are grateful to Ms. Ho. She's being sincere and she's finding time in her busy schedule to meet with us. She's so busy that the summit cannot make arrangements to allow the young people to attend. And then for this meeting, we haven't been notified of the postponement of the meeting. We only got an email and became aware of the change in the schedules. And you are so busy that even when we want to change the time we come, you say it is not possible. You don't even provide a name list. And that's why we're not able to swap our time slots with others. Now you can see that there are many empty seats here. You're so busy that without consulting the young, you still say that the theme is on promoting youth upward mobility. Now, if I may also comment on why the young should move upwards. It's not that we are not interested in getting upward mobility. We all want to realize our potentials.
But for young people in Hong Kong, it's difficult for us to live comfortably. So how can we move upward? I will tell you our conditions. I was in a high dip program and I just graduated. I just got a job and the monthly pay is about $12,000, and I have to pay my mom and dad. I also have to spend on commuting. Now the transport fares are quite high, and I cannot apply for a PRH because we are criticized for being good at nothing. Of course, we cannot afford to buy our own property. And even for renting a place, according to Mr. Chen and Mr. Ho, now even subdivided units are very expensive. If it's a 100 square foot room, it would be $4,000 or $5,000. So how can we afford it? So for this so-called Commission on Poverty, has it ever considered the conditions of young people? You're saying that you're very concerned about the youth. You want to lift us out of poverty, but what have you done? And for the Commission on Poverty Summit, you have not invited young people. You just talk to people who are like-minded. I think you have the sincerity to talk to us. So our organization would like to have a meeting with you, Ms. Doris Ho, and later on we'll ask you for your contact number. So please don't rush to leave after the meeting. On behalf of the Legislative Council, I would like to clarify something. Now, you criticize the arrangement for today's meeting. Sorry, please let me finish. Is not the government's fault. Dr. Fernando Cheung said it very clearly in the first session. We have learned from this lesson and we will make adjustments in the future. Later on, I can talk to you about this. Next, Hong Kong Rehabilitation Society, Mr. Ng Siu Lun. Thank you, Chairman. Now, with regard to the 2014 poverty report, the poor population is now at the lowest in 6 years' time. However, there are a lot of people who are chronically ill or who are PWDs, and they are under a lot of financial pressure, but the report is silent on them. As for PWDs and the chronically ill, for our center, we interviewed 221 of them, and we discovered that 53% of the interviewees have been unemployed for quite some time. And for some PWDs and chronically ill, they want to work and they may be quite well educated. However, even though they try hard, they cannot get a job. They cannot make a living. For PWDs and chronically ill, even though they get a job, they still face a lot of difficulties. Maybe it's due to their disability. They cannot work for a very long time on a full-time basis. As for the low-income working family allowance scheme, it has not relaxed on the working hours requirements, so these people cannot get support. And for the carers, they are also facing the same problems. Well, the carers have to take care of the PWDs and the chronically ill. They have to give up their own jobs. And the family financial situation may worsen. We join hands with Hong Kong U and the Carer Alliance. We interviewed 77 carers last year. We discovered that the median income was $14,000. And if we look at the present poverty line, that means 49.3% of the carer families are poor households. And among them, 38.9% of them are working poor. So the data show that for families like this, the poverty situation is very grave. Although they may try to find jobs, but the carers would have to take care of their family members. So our center has the following suggestions. First, we hope the government and members can think about this. That is, carers should be given subsidies. And also employment is the most important pathway for being lifted out of poverty. So I think an employment quota should be given to the PWDs and the chronically ill. And also the government, NGOs, and educational institutions should take the lead. They should employ more PWDs. And we hope that the NGOs can also announce their policy of employing PWDs. Fourthly, we hope that there can be a central registration system so that PWDs can register and it will convenience employers if they want to hire them. And also for LIFA, I think the restrictions on PWDs should be lifted. Thank you, Mr. Ng. Next, Ms. Ho, Concern Group for Students. As for the poverty report, it shows that children in poverty is 18%, so it's a very, very serious problem. And this year it focuses on LIFA is going to subsidize children of poor households. But I have 4 questions. I hope the government can answer my questions. First of all, for LIFA, it would only help households with long working hours and low income. But for casual workers and families of which the father works on the mainland, how are you going to help the children of such families? Second, for the whole report, it has been quite silent on the support for kindergarten and primary schools. Now for kindergarten, if it's a whole day school, the tuition fee is $67,540. It's very expensive. And you said you have reviewed the tuition fee reduction, but that's not enough. Because the tuition fee has been going up all the time. So even if you increase your subsidy, the grassrooters will still find it very difficult to afford. So for the ceiling of tuition fee and the ceiling of subsidy, can they be aligned? And for kindergarten, subsidy now is very limited, and there's no subsidy for books. So the 15-year free education report said that book subsidies should be provided to grassroots households. So can the community care fund do this? That is supports kindergarten pupils in terms of book subsidy. The CSSA system has not been reviewed for more than 10 years. There are a lot of flaws. For example, extracurricular activities. We have always been saying that extracurricular activities are very important. And the new system of 334 is very important. So extracurricular activities should also be subsidized. Also, for Internet subsidy is $1,300. That's far from enough. It has not been reviewed for a very long time. As for meal subsidy is also not enough. The threshold for comprehensive subsidy is too high. So will the government review the whole CSSA system? And also for the report on CSSA family graduates, when will you be publishing that report? Thank you. Next, Ms. Poon from concerned group for the employment of the deaf. Now we have sign language service, and we train sign language interpreters. We also provide job matching for the deaf. We hope that employments can help to improve the life of the deaf. Now we would like to share our experience with you so that you would understand what kind of employment problems the deaf are facing. I hope we can all join hands to solve these problems. For education and training, they are very important when it comes to a person's work life. Now, it can broaden the vision of a person, and education can also help a person to obtain skills so that he can get jobs. As for the deaf, when it comes to professional development, they are subject to a lot of misunderstandings and discriminations. I have seen the following cases. For example, member A is a deaf person, and he communicates with people through sign language. He wanted to sign up for a safety card program. However, the program organizer says that he has to find his own sign language interpreter for the lesson. And also for that sign language interpreter, he also has to pay tuition fee. So if he's going to join the program, he has to pay double the tuition fee. We have consulted the Equal Opportunities Commission. The EOC says that this has actually breached disability discrimination ordinance. However, up to now, that institution has not made any responses. And then member A goes to another institution for the same program, but that institution says that it will not enroll deaf people, and even if he can join the training, he won't be able to find a job. Well, some people think that the sign language interpreter is a large machine and it may affect the electronic devices. So for this member A, he doesn't get a chance to be trained. Well, this is just the tip of an iceberg. You can see that for the deaf, it's very difficult for them to get education and eventually be lifted out of poverty. So we hope that training institutes and employers would know more about sign language interpreters. And we also hope that the law enforcement agencies can discharge their duties and help people with disabilities. Mr. Hong Fu-Yuk. I would like to thank Ms. Doris Ho for attending the meeting. Well, she has been dreaming during the meeting. I think she should learn from her colleague. The person sitting next to her was at least trying to jot down something. I would like to tell you what we young people are facing. I don't know if you've heard about this. There's a person called Bill. He's actually a good-for-nothing young person in Hong Kong. He makes about $10,000 a month. He's 30. He's still living with his parents. So what problems are he facing? One day his mom says, well, why don't you move out? Your elder brother and sister-in-law will move in with us. And suddenly he discovers that, well, he may lose his warm family soon. So he tries to find a place to live, and he starts applying for a PLH unit. When he goes to the housing authority, he finds that the world is far from ideal. Well, the HA colleagues, the HA officer says that, well, you are single, and if that is the case, then you have to wait for 30 years before you can get a unit on an island. Well, Bill was taken aback. And the officer said that biggest problem with you is that you are making $16,000 a month and you cannot satisfy the means test. So please go away. So Bill was very disappointed, and then he saw a newspaper talking about aided or assisted housing. And if you want to apply for assisted housing, you have to have a family. So as a young person in Hong Kong, as a good for nothing in Hong Kong, he cannot apply for public housing. So what can he do? Of course, he cannot afford to buy a private property. So can he only sleep on the streets? He was crying in a park, and there was an old man next to him, and the old man said that if you have no place to live, you can build a hut on a hillside. But can we solve the problem like this now? So for this COP summit, you are trying to deceive young people, saying that they can move upward, and you are asking young people to receive a lot of trainings, trying to convince them that they will move upward afterwards, and after their work hour they would have to use their leisure time to go to school. So I would like Doris Ho to stay after the meeting. Although you are just a low-ranking government officer, but you are not a bad officer. So I think you better stay behind so that we can talk to you. Next concern group for the chronically ill, Mr. Chan Chi-hei. On the 25th of April this year, we conducted a study. We interviewed PWDs and the chronically ill, and the unemployment rate is 42%, but the unemployment rate in Hong Kong is 3%, so it's 12 times higher. And most of 60% of the interviewees got diplomas, and 30% of them even have received tertiary institution education, and they really want to work. 72% of them know that even if they don't work, they can get welfare, but they still choose to work. So for the PWDs, it's not that they are unskilled, they are uneducated, or they are lazy. Now with the advancement of technology and now that more people can receive education, actually the PWDs' working ability is much higher. The government tries to give the PWDs a lot of training. Actually, they need a labor market which would hire them. So we think that an employment quota should be set up because employment is very important for PWDs. The government should not just chant slogans. And second, the government should revise the present welfare policy, because the present policy is not to lift the PWDs out of poverty. You are just forcing us to receive welfare, and we cannot act as individuals when we want to apply for CSSA. So when one family member is a PWD, the whole family will be burdened. And our concern group also wants the government to do this. That is, for the PWDs who would like to work, subsidies should be provided to them so that they can buy rehabilitation equipment. So for PWDs, if they go out to work and get pay, however, such pay cannot pay for their rehabilitation equipment, so how can they go out to work? And also we have come into contact with a lot of PWDs, and many of them need carers. The carers can share with a lot of people, and also the PWDs can share their experiences with other people. Well, everyone has to go through the vicissitudes of life. So the PWDs do not only need welfare, they want comprehensive policy so that they can give play to their abilities. Next, Ms. Pang Ching-san from 投作時分. I would like to tell you what's happening in the North District. Well, several groups have formed an alliance for the North District's interest. And in Shek-Wu-Hui and Qinghe Estate, we have conducted a survey. We have interviewed over 300 Gai Fong. So for the residents in North District, they have a lot of needs. However, the government doesn't have any policy in place to help them. For example, 80% of, or almost 90% of them think that commodities are very expensive in North District.
Besides that, they have very little choices now because the rents in Shengshui are getting higher and higher. And the small shops in Shengshui find it very hard for them to survive. So people in the area find that, for the daily necessities, they can't really, buy them so easily. So the first thing is about, their lack of ability to buy the daily necessities they need. And secondly, for employment, we found that in the district, often the jobs are centered in the area of retails. And our survey find that many people in the district actually have various talents, but the jobs open to them do not really match their skills. There are skills that they have that actually do not match the jobs that are available. Therefore, now in Shengshui, we are actually advocating a community-based economy. We hope that people there can have chances to utilize their talents, say for women. Maybe they cannot work extra hours a day, even if the government says that you can provide childcare services for them, and yet these women cannot find the work that suits them. Our community economy plan is to help people in Shengshui to actually engage in some kind of cooperative. And together, they can promote the community economy. But under our current social policy, the government has not actively promoted community economy. That actually is something that can be used promoted to help promote women get jobs, to promote employment among the women. Thank you. Next one is the Ms. Chen Shuk-Ting from actually Community Economy Mutual Help Program. Thank you. Under globalization, working poor and also uneven distribution of resources and so forth and damage to the environment are common problems, and Hong Kong is no exception. If you want to improve the condition of the poor, you really have to develop community-based economy, apart from offering the poor with cash benefits. That's the new economic model that we can promote. In 2011, the St. James Settlement initiated such a program in Wan Chai. And in our 13-year survey, we found that this model does have a good impact of actually providing benefits for the economy, culture, and also local economics. There is a 70-something old man, and he, despite his age, he was involved in a cooperative that sells surplus bread in the community and also allow members to share the bread. And also with coupons, the members can actually
get furniture that they need. So we are setting up a network that helps people share their community resources and lift people out of poverty. And secondly, another people in the area, Oi, in 2005, she came to Hong Kong as a new immigrant. And yet, she managed to find her first job in the community, and she managed to integrate into community, enjoyed support from and care from other people in the community, and her 4 children also got help with tutoring. You can see that in our first our study report, more than 60% of the people surveyed could find jobs outside of the mainstream market, and they could also improve their standard of living. And 56% of them said they're happier than before because they could utilize their talents and get even more information about what's happening in the community. Socially, as you said, with more networks, friends, and also being able to get to know people of different backgrounds is another benefit for these people. And also 70% of the members said that they could actually have access to people who could help solve their problems in life. And some members managed to find the value of life through participating in the scheme. So I think the government should work together with communities to set up more, district-based gathering places, like have a shop or markets where people can gather to develop district-based economy. And you should also, evaluate outdated policies, and you should look at developing community economy funds to help develop the community to help solve problems there. Thank you, Ms. Chang. Next one is quotas for people with disabilities alliance. Mr. C. Yes, our alliance was set up by a number of various organizations concerned about the employment rights of the disabled and also the chronically ill. We want to fight for fair employment chances for these people and also to fight for more favorable working conditions for people like them. We want to point out that people with disabilities are entitled to basic freedom and all kinds of rights, and they are also entitled to working in a working environment without barriers. We want to help everyone experience their value in life, and I think wages to the disabled is not just a source of income to support their living, but also a way that through which they can affirm their self-worth and ability. Therefore, the Alliance strongly urges the Hong Kong SAR government to, as the largest employer in Hong Kong, to take the lead in hiring people with disabilities and to formulate employment quota for these people, and also to encourage the private market to hire more people with disabilities. They should also encourage the welfare organizations and other subvented organizations to hire people with disabilities. I think there should be a central register, for example, through the Labor Department, so as to facilitate employers offering jobs or recruiting the disabled. And there should be legislative work initiated for improving the job opportunities for the disabled. We believe that everyone actually people are faced with barriers due to the environment that they're in. So a barrier-free society will help with this. Will provide help for these people. Next one is Ms. Zhao. From the low-income groups. Thank you. We actually want to say that the threshold for applying for LIVA is too high. You need to have worked 192 hours, and this is too harsh for families with members who are working on a casual basis. People working as casuals, actually they are in a similar position as those applying for the transport subsidy. I think 99% of the families doing casual jobs are not entitled to the transport subsidy because they could not provide the proof of the income nor the proof for their working hours. So this lever asks for the 192 hours is a repetition of the same approach used for the transport subsidy, and that would exclude many needy families out of the net. Is it that these families do not need any support at all? Is it that children of these disadvantaged families will not be given any help? I think is it that the government and the society do not need people like them or do not need CSSA families? I think your requirement on the working hours has actually separated families into different classes, and this actually would undermine the right of children to have proper development. I think you should take into consideration the needs of grassroots children. Besides looking after low-income families, you should provide subsidy to grassroots school children, including those who are on CSSA and those who are on student transport subsidy, so that children of families doing casual work can be given help. Thank you. Next one is the manpower ratio group, concern group. Manpower ratio concern group. Thank you. LegCo bypassed LegCo in allowing for extra raises some years ago, and they mentioned the reason of man hours. And now, at weekends, there should be 10,000 man hours. And you talk about, Tin Shui Wai Center, the Tin Shui Wai Center, but many staff there actually are not there, and there's only about 20 of them there. I think we worked so hard that we got sick, and when we line up for surgeries, actually by 2013, the Jockey Club also asked for additional change. I think the whole thing is very ridiculous. Let me play to you a TV news last week. Could you come back to our theme of poverty alleviation? This is about a case of a 63-year-old retiree who wants to make extra money to support his family. Therefore, he's doing 7 part-time jobs. You can hear that when a person above the age of 60 who has to work 7 part-time jobs to make his ends meet. Well, he works for, we're talking about a charity organization here. In the Jockey Club back in 2013, he said they would give people 100 above the age of 60, 100 hours of work, and then paying like $60 a day. That would make $3,600 a month. That would be way above the poverty line. That means that the person making that amount would have to work 7 hours in total. The Hong Kong Jockey Club is a sponsor and has got many awards, and yet how come he's doing that to his staff? Our staff there who work so hard that they got cancer. I hope that this will be my last time in LegCo. I do hope that Chen Yunhan will talk to me for a few minutes after the meeting. A staff with cancer is still being criticized. I hope that Cheung Kok-chu and Chen Yunhan aware about this situation. A charity, an award-winning charity, has staff who's worked so hard that they've got cancer and not being paid much. An internship, an intern who works who makes $7,000 a month, get medical benefits. And how come we, staff like us who work so hard, are not entitled to any support? Why is Hong Kong so poor? We're talking about rich organization here, and yet its staff is in such a state. I hope that when you review the granting of license, please look at their situation. How many people are working for it? Thank you, Mr. Wong. Well, we've listened to the deputations. Each of them spoke or had 3 minutes to speak. And now I'd like to get the administration to respond first, briefly, even though I think some of you may have spoken in the first or second sessions, but I think after you responded, I will give the time to the floor and also to our colleagues for questioning. So the Undersecretary first. Thank you. Just then, on the Fu Hong Association and the Association for the Deaf, they've expressed the concerns on, the subsidy for carers of people with disabilities. You may all know that under the Community Care Fund, on the carers, there's a pilot scheme on providing subsidy for carers of old people that was launched in June 2014. And we actually hire consultants to do a review of the scheme to see what the long-term development of the scheme should be like. Inevitably, it will also look at whether the subsidy should be applied to carers of people with serious disabilities. Among the disabled, 60% of them are old people. So they are actually in a similar situation. And you're also concerned about employment. I think that's exactly, what the Commission on Poverty and the government, have been following up on in the past few years. We have actually launched a number of measures. You may have heard about it. That is a charter scheme under which all subvented organizations, the business sector, and the government will join in. Or there are 460 organizations involved already, involved in the scheme. We want to help. Under the scheme, we want to help the disabled integrate into the workplace. So under the scheme, it's not that we want the organization can have various policies or training opportunities for disabled. We also hope to build up an inclusive workplace. And we hope that we will offer awards to organizations which have done a good job in providing an inclusive workplace. As for integration into society, I think communication is very important. The Labour and Welfare Bureau is also particularly concerned about this. More than 2 years ago, we set up a working group to promote the use of sign language. We've seen some progress since then. On the interpretation of sign language, we have actually come up with a course for sign language interpreters. Because once you have more sign language done, I know LegCo is very supportive of this, but there may not be enough supply of sign language interpreters. So that's very important. We have provided the training, and we will collaborate with the Alliance to actually get recognition for the course on sign language interpretation under the qualifications framework. Is now in level 3. So we will also have public education and other channels, and through the Continuing Education Fund to provide subsidy for sign language interpretation training. Just then, there's also the mention about, employment for people with disabilities. The fact that they disabled people may have found a job, a nice job, and yet they may want to stay in CSSA because of the need to get the medical subsidies. I know the task force under Commissioner on Poverty would continue to see whether they can find good measures to release more disabled people into the workplace or workforce. As for the suggestion for the central register, we do hope that that will be possible. Under Labour Department, the Employment Division is working in that regard. I think whether the Welfare Department or NGO, they're doing similar things, and we will see whether we can provide some kind of one-stop service. to enhance to concentrate resources and to better provide employment opportunities for the disabled. As for the liver, the threshold is not 192 but 944 hours. That is about 36 hours per week. So for people doing casual work, some of them may not do just one job. So the applicant could combine, whether 2 or 3 jobs, combine the hours together of those 2 or 3 types of jobs.
In the past few years, I've talked to the relevant groups. Some of them have told us that they may find it difficult to produce proof of their working hours or their wages. If they do encounter genuine difficulties, we'll be happy to see if they can rely on, say, making a statutory declaration so as to apply for the allowances. We have also noted that members are concerned about the case of the youth. Well, in fact, the Commission on Poverty is also concerned about the case of the young people, and that's why on this occasion we have got a UK expert to come to speak to us and tell us about the experience in the UK. For our paper, as you know, that we have under the Commission a task force on youth education, employment and training. It shows that we would like to be more focused in relation to the upward mobility of youth. We believe that when it comes to youth employment, as some of the young people have said, we need to have a diversified economy so that there will be more job opportunities and more placement opportunities. The other day, the friend from the UK told us that in addition to skills upgrading, we need internship, life planning, as well as mentorship programs to help the young to develop. And that's why we have come up with the Life Buddies mentorship program. We also refer to the low-income family allowance. We do have a special component for young children and young people in the family. We hope that we can provide some financial assistance so that they can sort of avoid the problem of intergenerational poverty. We have the Child Development Fund, and we have also got another fund, and that's exactly because we want to help the young people. We have got $200 million for the fund for the disabled. We have received 98 applications. The commercial sector will come up with $50 million. Since it is a matching grant, we have a total of $100 million. 80–90% of them will be launched within the year. So we hope that we can sort of help with the course. Maybe Ms. Ho would also like to supplement. Let me talk about our strategies to alleviate poverty. I think we want to develop our economy so that we can create jobs. When you analyze the poverty-related figures, employment is the best route to help people out of poverty. So economic development and job creation will be the main approach. It was also sort of stated during the Poverty Summit. For others who are PWDs, etc., we must provide a safety net and provide financial assistance. But then between economic development and a safety net, maybe there are still opportunities like community economy. Earlier on, we have already said that in the previous year, the Commission on Poverty has been focusing on retirement protection. In September, we are going to launch the public consultation exercise. And after that, we will look at community economy. We will ask the district officers to brief us on the topic. And then for upward mobility of the young, let me clarify one point. For the Poverty Summit on the 10th of October, we did invite representatives of the young people. There were about 500 attendees. We have asked schools, we have asked the Hong Kong Council on Social Service, we have asked different departments to identify representatives for us, and there were 70 or 80 of such representatives. When we talk about youth upward mobility, it is of course a very broad topic. We mustn't forget that we are the Commission on Poverty, and therefore we should look at the issue from the point of view of young people in poor families. Under the Commission, we have the Youth Education, Employment and Training Task Force. That task force will mainly look at the following issue. That is how we can help the grassroots young people make full use of opportunities and realize their potentials. We have always been reminded to be focused in our work. We have carried out a study on the earnings mobility of the higher education graduates. That study has been completed. So what we want to do is that we want to look at the case of graduates who have been given grants and loans in their studies. And we want to look at the changes across generations. So we hope that we will be assisted by such objective data so that that task force can make informed decisions. For grassroots young people, upon completion of a higher education course, we want to know about their mobility chances. If they don't fare very well, we want to know what more should be done to improve the opportunity. Mention has been made about the student loans. Yes, the Education Bureau has already carried out quite a lot of improvements. As to whether there is room for further improvement, we have an open mind. Some of you have asked when the earnings mobility study will be announced. In September, there was an initial discussion. We want to have a second chance to look at the study in greater details, and then we can come up with some recommendations. So probably it will be later this year that we can publish the report. Mention has been made about the school fees for whole-day kindergarten education. It was wondered whether the subsidy limit can be raised. The task force on youth education, employment and training did have a discussion, and we have made a suggestion to the Education Bureau. And then someone asked this question, that is, if we have a 3-year kindergarten education system, then there may be textbook subsidies for the needy kindergarten students, and you want to know whether the CCF can introduce something for the interim. I think once the policy has been decided, then we can consider such a suggestion. Mr. Chairman, maybe I would like to pause here, and I think I've covered the questions asked. Mr. Yun Han, Dr. K. Kwok, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong have queued up to ask questions. 5 minutes each, because we are not that tight about the time available. Mr. Yun Han. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had wanted to say something, but then having heard Ms. Ho and what the Undersecretary has said, I think I need to withdraw what I was supposed to say. I have a column and I've been writing an article. And for 2 terms of the government, they refused to draw a poverty line. For the current government, it has acceded to the request. I think the deputations have made very poignant points. Ms. Ho, you said that economic development and job creation would be our main approach. Well, in fact, we can talk about full employment currently. But the poverty problem hasn't disappeared. So it is obvious that more and more elderly people are poor. I'm afraid the figure would just grow and grow. You talk about economic development and job creation, and then we have been asking for retirement protection. We have all been fighting for universal retirement protection. We are saying that if the government is not going to do it on this occasion, maybe we should just drop the idea altogether. Our hair has grown gray after years of fighting for it. I think you haven't dared to face the reality. The government would like to juxtapose the universal retirement protection against selective retirement protection. I won't accept this. We have got a subcommittee on retirement protection. We have already equipped ourselves with ammunition to fight the government. You haven't gone to the root of the problem. Now we have got the Undersecretary from the Labour and Welfare Bureau with us. Again, you are off the focus. You emphasize self-reliance, helping the disadvantaged. You want to alleviate poverty. You want to help with upward mobility. I'm afraid you haven't done your part adequately. Last night, there was this show concerning Taipei. I think it calls for a change in the land policy. Unfortunately, the representative of the Land Justice Alliance has left. Whenever there's prosperity, the rentals will go up, and then that is not good. Even for NGOs who are running social enterprises, they are being threatened by the high rental levels. So the government must resolve the problem of high land prices. Last year we went to Taiwan for a duty visit. And bearing in mind what we saw on the TV screen last night about Taipei, there's the Mansang or livelihood community. Without cheap land, you can't do the same. Ms. Ho, I think you are also involved in economic development. The CE, when he was running for the post, came to meet with us. Now, we have lost the golden opportunities.
水務局嗰個叫咩啊？洗衣街死嚇？黑布街？唔係咩布街啊？染布房街？咪有個水務處同。
I think we used to have the offices of the WSD and the EPD in Mongkok. I think I've asked for that site to be made available for community economy. Now, if the government doesn't want to face the reality, I think it is just nonsense to talk about economic development. We have ambitions, but we need to be facilitated. None of us would like to live on low-income family allowance. We want to have a job. How are you going to help the SMEs? How are you going to resolve the conflict between the employers and employees? Now, if the government is willing to listen to the voice of the community, I suggest that maybe you should invite us to join your think tank, and then you know what you should do. In fact, I've even considered using the space under the flyovers. Now, it is reset. You look at the case of Germany, Singapore, and Taiwan. Just like what Mr. Leung Kwok-hung has said, maybe we should have a debate concerning the new capitalism for the 21st century. For the intelligentsia, for those creative, we all find it difficult to have any development because of the high land prices. I think the Commission on Poverty cannot resolve the problem at root. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Ms. Chen. I think you have spoken on behalf of a lot of people who are in poverty. Dr. Kiki Kwok, we are grateful to have so many still staying with us at this hour of 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. Mr. Xu and Ms. Ho weren't really answering the questions. We have many deputations telling us the crux of the matter. That is, at the district level, the economy is not prospering. And then for the young people, when they complete their secondary schooling, they just get a low-paid job. And there are two figures, and Mr. Chen Chi-hei has referred to that. That is, for the PWDs, their unemployment rate is 10 times that of the able-bodied. And for the young, again, they suffer from a higher unemployment rate than the general one. For the Commission on Poverty, they're still dwelling on the same thing. They always boast of the low-income family allowance, low-income working family allowance. Now, I understand that for the poverty line in Hong Kong, it is reset. $13,000 for a 3P household, $3,500 for a one-person household, and $8,500 for a two-person household. I think the government thinks that it is very pleased with itself with the poverty line. But if the poverty line is not adjusted in accordance with inflation, then you just get happier and happier. Whenever there is an inflation, then the income cannot catch up with inflation. Just try to buy from a fast food shop. It seems that the government doesn't understand the huge difficulties faced by the grassroots. The PWDs have asked you about the difficulties they have in getting a job. What about community economy? No, you haven't answered this question. And then, Mr. Chairman, Future Stars, it is supposed to be something to help the young. But then many PWDs cannot join the scheme called Future Stars. And for those who have left school, again, they cannot benefit from the program of Future Stars. What have you done for people who are seated here? They have been overlooked by the Commission on Poverty. So I ask you 3 questions. First, when can you introduce an allocation system or quota system so that PWDs would also have the same low unemployment rate as the general population? The PWDs are rejected by the employers. They can't find jobs. And what about community economy? Can you not abandon your very vague promises? please give us something more specific. And certainly, for the young who have already finished DSE, what will be done to lift them out of poverty so that they don't have to live in subdivided units for which they have to pay a few $1,000s a month?
Mr. Stephen Seal, first of all, about employment quota. Well, for a mandatory employment quota system, we have been talking about that for quite some time, and there have been different views. According to our experience, it may not be very effective. We have looked at overseas examples. For example, the European Commission and International Labour Organization, they also query if a quota system will help the employment of PWDs. Then, Mr. Seo, can you tell me how you can help them? Now the unemployment rate is over 40%. Now, when we look at the mainstream trend, there are two parts. First, in terms of legislation, of course, we should ban discrimination. And now, of course, we have DDO in Hong Kong already. And also, we need to provide incentives for employers. In the past few years, we have been providing incentives to employers. For example, well, we have been encouraging employers to do this. In the past, it was 6 months, each month $4,000, and then it's increased to 8 months, and then $5,500. And for a PWD, if he's to be working with other people, the acceptance of his co-workers is very important. So we would also provide incentive for his supervisor, $2,000 extra for his supervisor. So the employers may also be concerned that his workplace may have to be retrofitted and special equipment may have to be bought. So we also provide him with subsidies. The ceiling of the subsidy is $20,000. If the equipments are particularly expensive, it can be up to $40,000. And so through this program, we hope that we can create more jobs. We have already spent $89 million on this, and we've created over 1,000 jobs, and 700 of them were targeting PWDs. And also we have a charter system. So for all the NGOs and government departments, they are joining hands with the business sector to promote this. Now over 460 organizations have joined this program, but we will not stop here. Just now, some organizations suggested that maybe we can do more in terms of one-stop service, and we should provide more supports to employers, employees, and educate the co-workers more. Now, when an employer hires a PWD, he may be very worried how the PWD can be adapted to his workplace, and if he needs support, whether support will be provided. So for the Labor Department, it has already lengthened its support period from 3 months to 6 months. So we will continue to do more in this area, and we will come up with more initiatives. And just now we've talked about some PWDs who are on CSSA. If they are on CSSA, they may also be receiving healthcare subsidies. So the relevant task force of the COP is looking into this issue. Just now, some deputations said that maybe we can allow rehabilitated people to help rehabilitated people. For example, those those mental rehabilitants can be given an opportunity to help their peers, and also trainings can be provided to them. So we are trying to do a lot in a number of areas. I know that the Rehabilitation Society has conducted a survey, but I can give you some more figures. According to last year's reports on PWDs, on the whole, the unemployment rate is 3.4%. As for PWDs, it's 6.4%, double the size. But let us not just look at this figure. We should also look at the participation rate. The participation rate is about 73% for the general public, but for the PWD, it's 37 to 39%. So many of them cannot participate in the labor market. We know that this is a grave problem, and this is one of the major directions that the Commission on Poverty will continue to focus on. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Mrs. Carrie Lam said that if a government official does not want anything more, then he can be bold. Now, you are saying that employment is the solution for poverty. Well, in terms of economics, I think we have almost a 100% employment rate. So now we have 3%. Should it be reduced to 0%? Now, because you are compressing pay, so that's why people have to take low-pay jobs. That's why that's a 100% employment rate. Our SMW is what? $32.5, and for EU is 8.5 euros. So it's not that people that are not working that are poor. They are working, but they are still poor. So you should improve the SMW, but you say you can't do that because the capitalists don't want to do it. How about maximum working hours? Well, a lot of people are exploiting workers, and they will be forced to employ more people if we have maximum working hours. So for those who are not working out, they would have jobs. So I think you really are not doing a good job. And also, you say that you are already subsidizing a lot of things. So the poor population has reduced by 40,000. So what have you done? For the elderly, poverty rate is still on the rise. On the whole, the poverty population has dropped, but for the poor elderly, the number is still going up. So if there's no universal retirement protection, how are you going to help these people? You are providing the elderly with more units. So how about young people? Now, if you are 18 years old, you should not apply for a PLH because of the point system. So what are you talking about? Upward mobility? If you want to do something for a group of people, then another group of people may suffer. So what mobility are you talking about? Well, is Mrs. Carrie Lam is really so bold. She should say it out loudly. We need a redistribution of wealth in society. Now, Mrs. Carrie Lam is so bold. He should ask the rich people to give back to society. You're saying that a universal retirement protection scheme is not sustainable, and I'm saying that for those companies who are making a profit of more than $10 million should fork out more, and you don't agree to that. I'm asking you, are you very tired tonight? Are you hungry? If I don't have to pay, I'll give you a piece of bread. Is that possible? What kind of poverty alleviation policy are you talking about? Now you have 9 pieces of bread, and they have to be shared by 10 people. Why don't you go find more bread so that all these people can be fed? You're talking about poverty alleviation. You want people to be patriotic. Xi Jinping lately talked about poverty. He said that a person governing the country should be like a parent who loves his children, and he should be sympathetic to the underprivileged. This is the tradition of China. What have you done? You know people who are hungry, but are you sympathetic to them? Oh, you just set up a fund here, a fund there. You say that in June 2014 there will be, there was at this 2-month scheme for carers. And for those who are seriously disabled, maybe after 2 years we'll try to help you. And 60% of this seriously disabled, they are elderly, so they should not enjoy double benefits. So if a person is both old and disabled, why can't you give him double benefits? How come it has become a coefficient? Why can't it become a coefficient? Why can't it become 1.25? Now this person is old and disabled. He's unfortunate. So how come he doesn't deserve double benefits? What kind of people are you? To be frank, if I don't fight C.Y. Leung, I am letting myself down. Well, Ms. Chen Yuanhan is sitting next to me. She says that before he even assumed his post as the emperor, he's already sharpening his knife. And he's playing with words. Now, there are 2 very important things about poverty alleviation. First, you should make sure that they enjoy an adequate pay. You should legislate on maximum working hours, and you are not doing anything. And you are saying these people are not making contributions. Who are you? I debated this with James Tian 10 years ago. He said that because the poor don't pay tax, so they are not making contribution. And this is your logic now. It's been 10 years ago. Well, C.Y. Leung knows how to play with words, but what policies does he have? I'm telling you these 2 principles. That is, working hours would have to be cut and SMW would have to go up so that people can save money. Are you crazy? Do I need a matching fund from you? You just give me money. Well, you just force the capitalists to give us money, and you can cut on government rent. Thank you, Mr. Alan Leung. Thank you, Chairman. About 200 people signed up for today's hearing. Just now, Dr. Fernando Cheung has apologized to those who signed up. In terms of arrangements, there were some mistakes. But if you look at the number of people who signed up, you would already know this. Well, we are not talking about rocket science. If the COP really has done something, if people see hopes, then they won't all seize this opportunity and come to speak here. Well, I've been talking about this for over 11 years. Over 100 people attend our meeting today, and I want to say it again. just to show my respect for them. Now, the biggest problem now is working poor. It's not that people can't find a job, but they have to work for more than 10 hours a day, and they can barely make ends meet. Just now, Ms. Ho spoke on behalf of the COP. She talked about the grand strategies, and two very important things are the creation of jobs and economic development. We have been talking about this for many years at the LegCo. Chairman, let me cite an example. If we want women to go out to work, the government should provide child care service. We have been talking about this for years. Well, it's not the government hasn't done anything. It has done something. For example, there are some pilot schemes and trial schemes. The government's problem is that it tries to come up with a lot of initiatives, but none of these initiatives are good enough. You want to release the manpower of women so that they can go out to work and make some money for their families. But there are a lot of constraints. However, you cannot protect the labor as well. That includes SMW and maximum working hours. If you can't do this, how can you solve the problem of working poor? For subsidies for students, we also have been talking about that. Now, after graduating from university, you already owe the government a lot of money. It's very different from the day when I graduated. The government says it's doing a lot of things now, but we don't see any effect. For low-income working family allowance scheme is also very important. I can go on and on, Chairman. Well, out of my respect for the attendees today, I would like to say this. I understand what difficulties we are facing. I just cited some examples leading to the unfairness in Hong Kong. It's not that we do not have enough resources. It's just that these resources are not distributed fairly. So how can we narrow the wealth gap? I think the government has done a poor job. This COP should exist. However, it still cannot solve the problem. It's just does something here, something there. It has a little bit of achievement, but still there are a lot of problems remain unresolved. I don't think the Undersecretary here today can solve the problem. So is the government doing everything behind closed doors? Well, we have this CE who's elected by a small group of people, and many members of this council have vested interests. I should play the role as a monitor, and I think we all understand what's going on. I hope that the 100 plus attendees would feel better because we LegCo members understand your difficulties. I believe that members do not want to ask questions because you know the answers already. You just want to express your views. It seems that Mr. Lam would like to supplement. Mr. Lam?
Thank you. I think I learned a lot from the members who've spoken. I'm here representing the efficiency unit. One of our roles is to support the task force under the Commission on Poverty, which is a social innovation and entrepreneurship fund. The whole discussion today in the 3 sessions, and no mention was made of the fund, but maybe because we didn't do good enough publicity work. But in 2013, this fund was set up, and there was initial funding of $500 million for it. The Commission tried to have new thinking. They really want to break new ground to see how we can revitalize the economy. Just we talk about the issue of how to create employment by developing economy. People of a certain age would know that when the local economy begin to grow, we started off by manufacturing plastic flowers, and we changed to be a service sector and then a financial center, and then we develop our tourism. Now we have to identify the direction for our future economic growth. The Commission feels that social innovation could be a way out, and it can also help alleviate poverty. Because of that, we set up the fund. We spent some time in planning for the fund for social innovation. I think internally the government isn't really familiar with it. Therefore, we have brought in a lot of experiences from UK, Australia, and Singapore. We wanted to promote, on this question of fighting poverty. It's not just about what a single government can do. To address the issue, you need to involve the whole society to achieve good results. Therefore, we are talking about cross-sectoral cooperation. For example, the business sector, general members of the public. Let's not forget the young people as well. We'll see how these sectors can do more innovation and set up their own businesses, not so much in manufacturing plastic flowers or establishing a bank, but we want to see what can be done together. Unlike other government funds, you mentioned about various schemes, the partnership scheme or 3Es, which target at NGOs, organizations, non-profit making organizations. But our fund in particular targets at not just NGOs, but also social enterprises, as well as general members of the public, anyone, any Hong Kong person indeed. The most important is that they can come up with new tricks, ideas to create jobs as well as to help alleviate poverty. We do hope to have a new direction. But it may not address all the problems, but we try to find ways to develop the economy further, to create jobs so that people in Hong Kong, including young people, even retirees, if they are in a difficult situation financially, then they may have a chance to, as you said, find a way to support themselves. I just want to supplement here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Yes. Well, I thought there were a lot of time left, but now at this stage, I find that our time is really tight. I think that our meeting is supposed to end at 8:15, but Lam Kwok Heng, would you mind? I want to see whether the deputations today or guests whether they would like to, having listen to officials and members. Would you like to respond in any way? If there's anyone who would like to do that, I will try to give you some time. 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Okay, 4 of you. So, members, I would like to extend the meeting by 10 minutes. Each one of you will have 2 minutes, okay? Question and answer included. You can use up the 2 minutes if you just want to make a comment. If you want the officials to respond, please reserve time for the official to respond. 2 minutes each. Okay, Ms. Dai first. Thank you, Chairman. Just then, thank you, Mr. Seal and Ms. Ho, for answering my question. You said that you have hired a UK organization to come to the summit to talk about upward social mobility and developing the economy further to create jobs. But you've heard from long hair that the question in Hong Kong is not so much about employment. Even if I were able to find a job, say if I get a job that pays me a little bit more than $10,000 a month, I have to pay for my rent. I need to pay off my student loans and also to eat. And do I have money left to support my parents' living? Even if I don't have to pay for my family's expenses, if I live with my family, then if I live with my family, then we'll become a rich tenant, and then we'll have to double our rent to the government, and then we may be forced to move out of the public housing. And then we have to rent. Are we to rent subdivided flat instead? Or if I sign up or fill in a document to qualify my parents to get CSSA, then what money do we have left for food and other things, daily necessities? So I think the same issue facing all the poor people in Hong Kong is, as Carrie Lam said at the summit, the retirement protection cannot possibly become universal. What do you want us to do? $3,600 will disqualify a person from being called a poor person. But if you have $3,600 a month, then you will not be entitled to retirement protection. So it is an insurance scheme, supposed to be an insurance scheme, right? And yet it's not some kind of social welfare. Okay, Ms. Ho from Concern for Students. 2 questions here, thank you. I'd like to ask. I was talking about people who could not, children who cannot be qualified for the liver, or people who are getting CSSA, or families of immigrants from China, new arrivals from China, and who have to work to take care of the family. How would you help these families? I believe that children's subsidy should not be based on family background or working hours. So grassroots children should be entitled to some sort of protection. And I'd like to ask, when would you review the student subsidy scheme and the CSSA scheme? Mr. Siu? Okay, briefly. For each scheme, none of the schemes can actually cater for everyone by itself. But whether it's for the CSSA or low-income family allowance scheme, if there are any families that fall through the cracks, then we'll see what we can do to cater to those people who can benefit from those schemes. And secondly, you know that on the whole, CSSA system operates according to a certain mechanism, and it will be adjusted in accordance with certain index. From 2011 to 2015, we've seen an increase to 23.3%. So whether individual categories are enough to meet people's needs, we'll have to look at the actual situation. We have to find out how big the need is. The Social Welfare Department, apart from its annual adjustment every 5 years, it will, on the basis of CSSA households expenditure, adjust the weighting figure. So that could reflect the needs out there. Next one, Mr. Hong. I want to respond to I think what Mr. Lam said about the fund for starting a business. I think I can't see how you're different from C.Y. Leung, in being transcendent. You said that you could help the retirees to come back to find work, but please don't make us laugh. Mr. Siu said that, people have said that it's so difficult for people with disabilities to find work, and yet the government is taking the lead in discriminating against disabled. For an unemployment rate of up to 40% among the PWDs. So why can't you make it mandatory for employers to hire disabled people? If you're not doing that, are you saying that you are having some doubts? I think that's really laughable. Ms. Ho may not have heard it clearly. We are not asking for really social ability. All we want is housing for us. That would be okay. MPF actually is running at a loss every year in the past 2 months. For each personal account, on average, there's a loss of $15,000 for each MPF account. So I can see clearly that MPF cannot support people in their retirement years. So as a young person, I very much support universal retirement protection. So please, when you go back, discuss it, say it to Carol Lam. It's not that she's not doing anything other than we'll neglect it. We'll fight for it no matter what. Either you don't force our young people to engage in some sort of occupy movements. You may be scared of that. The older generation may be scared of that. Please take note of what we've said. Let me say this again. We want housing. We don't need, any kind of or so-called upward social mobility. I don't know why you're laughing. I don't know whether it's shameless on your part or what. Okay, next one, Mr. Wong. I think we have with us here the rehab commissioner, right? I used to work for a workers' union. Let me tell you that I have been forced out by the Hong Kong Jockey Club because they considered my attendance rate. I was sick, and because I was sick and I didn't meet the attendance requirement, and they kicked me out. I can tell you, for people who work part-time, they don't need to show any proof of medical certificates. And yet for full-time staff, I have to meet the attendance requirement. That means when there's people going on holiday, I would need to come, even if I'm sick. So for casual workers, a young person, they can only work 120 hours at an hourly rate of 15. How can they make a living by earning $6,000 a month? And after the Jockey Club kicked me out, and it actually can do whatever it like. I hope that the Labour Department can check that when I met with Cherry Cheng in 2004, my name is Wong Kwai Sun. I met with your Dr. Leung Lai Man. Next month, you'll be talking about the issue of occupational safety. So now, what's happened to me? Is it all my fault? I'm on disability allowance. I hope that the Labour Department don't just tell me to get legal aid. Chung Kok Chu, at night, on December 7, 2011, I was admitted into hospital. My neck was so stiff, I had to be carried to the hospital. At that night, I could not claim for any occupational injury, and the company did not provide any claim for occupational injury for me. You can look back at the record in 2009 when many people supported the increase in the racing hours. Our HR was there and they negotiated the deal. Thank you, Mr. Wong. I think all the deputations, in the 3 sessions have expressed their views. I'm sure the administration has listened to them. And let me repeat this again. Earlier, some officials have not really addressed some concerns raised, but I know maybe you can't really address them, but you do need to jot them down. Firstly, I think We're not asking for any charter here, charter on employment for disabled people, but we do want some sort of mandatory quota. If you have a quota, then, of course, you can also discuss the proper country arrangement for it, which may not need to be the same as the quotas in Europe or overseas countries, but we can try to set up our own quota system using our own wisdom. And there's also mention of retraining for deaf people. That could be an isolated case that you could find out more, which 2 retraining centers were involved. Maybe other retraining centers have similar issue because there are no support measures provided. And thirdly, grassroots, rental control for the grassroots. I think we all made it very clear. We're talking about rental control for the grassroots. Public rental housing, there's inadequate supply of it. I'm not going into detail on that again. But as for the use of land, as the Alliance said, I think the points made by the Alliance, I think you do need to look into that later. 2 points here. 1, we should review the regulation on cooperatives. We've said this many times, but the government doesn't seem to have seriously studied it. Even if you're not going to review, please tell us the reason. And Mr. Stee also talked about the review on CSSA expenditure. You made 2 points on the annual adjustment based on inflation and the weighting adjustment. That cannot resolve, or that does not equate to the review we asked for on the CSSA. And rehab services and subsidy for basic equipment for rehab. I think that's also something you need to look into. Particularly Mr. Ao Yang, you could look into that. Also the mention of subsidy for carers for disabled people. I don't think we need to wait till the subsidy for carers of elderly people, the review for that is done. Because the caring for disabled people is even tougher than caring for old people. I think it's very clear. You should, under the Community Care Fund, really study that, the possibility of the review. And also, lastly, I would like to highlight the need to listen to young people. If you can, I don't want you to just listen to 1 or 2 types of young people, but to listen to all the views of all kinds of young people. And we haven't really addressed that issue today, but lastly, personally, on social innovation and entrepreneurship, it sounds good on the surface, but how are we going to develop our economy? What is the best way to go? It's not just about, unified or uniform growth, but diverse economy. You have innovations, but if you have enterprises that provide low-paying jobs, then that could not alleviate poverty either. I think we are talking about structural issues now. Please don't just be satisfied with slogans. We should have concrete study done instead. So that's all my views. I'd like to thank deputations in the 3rd session and also the 4 officials who've been sitting here, sat through the whole 3 sessions for more than 6 hours. I hope we all benefited, and please try to have all the views reflected and expressed. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.